I'm Kevin Power, and this is SaskScapes, the podcast featuring stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. Welcome back. This is the continuation of episode 81. In this episode, you'll hear from Megan Nash, Carrie Hecker, Ryan Hicks, and Glenn Suter. This is the team that brought the entire Songs for Nature camp together. Unless you've been living under a rock, you will know the name Megan Nash, singer-songwriter, Saskatchewan's pride and joy. And she happens to be sitting here with me. Hey, Megan.
Thanks for talking to me.
Nice to finally meet you.
Yeah. Mutual.
Yeah, so here we are, hanging out in this phenomenal atmosphere, far from the bustling city. Mm-hmm. Tell me how you got involved in this project.
Well, I got involved back in 2015. Glenn asked me to be involved. Mm-hmm. I knew it was right around the time I had met Ryan too. We were at a workshop in Regina, and he said, "Hey, are you doing that songwriting for nature thing?" I said, "I have no clue what it's about, but I guess I'll go to the meeting." And I did, and I still actually, honestly, at the end of the meeting, I was still kind of not 100% sure what it was, but I said yes because I thought Glenn and Ryan are both really nice people, and I'd like to work with them. So I just said, okay, sure. Mm-hmm. I've attended songwriting programs, workshops before. I've done songwriting workshops in schools where I go to the school or the community center in a smaller center and workshop songs. That is a different process, though. This is way more hands-on, mm-hmm. and it's just longer, you know.
Mm-hmm. But at that time, you didn't know what the form this would take. Like, you didn't know the age demographic or anything, right?
I knew, no, actually, no. At the start, it was still kind of getting worked out. We didn't really know the age and, like, what grades and that whole process. And I don't work in the school system. Like, right. I'm coming at it from a way different perspective, just fully, like, the songwriter perspective. Mm-hmm. And I was using, I guess, my own experience attending workshops when thinking about how, you know, giving my input to how the planning should go and what the weekend should look like. Uh-huh. But, it's really developed, you know.
Right. And probably even more so since you actually got together in September. Oh. It's probably continuing to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We did check-ins with the students between our September workshop weekend and this weekend. And that was a process too, just trying to... check in to encourage people to be working on their songs still and to see where people are at. And it's been an interesting process. I get an insight to other people's creativity, their creative processes. Same with, I'm learning a lot from Ryan and Glenn as well. So it's been a really neat experience.
It's an interesting age demographic, and they still have so much to learn about life. Do you find is it harder to sort of meet these kids at the stage that they're at now and not throw big concepts at them that they still aren't ready for? Or do you always find that this demographic is much smarter than we give them credit for?
You know what? I almost wonder if it's like the opposite sometimes. Like, what I mean by that is, like, I feel like when we're 17, that's when we are like, big picture, like, none of this makes sense, or like we're really questioning everything that we used to trust and have so much faith in. Like, I remember when I was 17, I was really it wasn't that long ago, and I was really angry yet curious, yet like, just, it's a time to explore concepts. So if anything, I feel like we lighten up a little bit as we get older, because you get to that point where it's like, well, I'll never really know, or you find, and you can find comfort in the unknown, where it's like right now, like when you're questioning everything, like there's a lot of emotion behind all of that. So I feel like when you're 17, that's like a prime time to start writing songs, because that's when you're really questioning all those things. Or maybe when you're older, it's just like you don't worry about it as much, or
you become bitter and jaded. And have nothing to say
maybe,
at all.
or you just like, or like then write about the smaller, or get caught up in adulthood, but like there's that lingering point, right? It's almost like a twilight in time, where it's like, well, the real world the real, quote unquote, air quotes, real world hasn't started yet, and I'm still like the dog days of summer or whatever, clinging on to those days of youth, and you're just questioning everything. So that's a lot to write songs about. So a lot of the songs are quite personal, and quite deep, and they're about real.
Oh yeah, things. They've been sharing some of them. Yeah. So when you first get together, from your perspective, what part do you play in breaking the ice for these guys? I mean, they're all meeting each other basically for the first time.
I really wanted to write a group song with the kids, because I've done that before. I shouldn't say it kids, like with the teenagers, with the students. Participants, yeah. And so we had about 3 hours, and I wanted to write this group tune, and because I love doing stuff like that, because it could really fall flat, So I love that pressure, and it's kind of like it could totally be a disaster, but it's like a rush. Like it's like I get a bit of adrenaline going when I'm trying to write a song with that many people in that short time frame. And there was a lyric too that some of the students wrote, and we broke out our guitars and broke the ice, and that is really like they're just like, they knew all the same top 40 songs to jam, and they were just jamming, and it was like like there's been so much Adele sang this weekend, and last weekend too. They're like, there are some big Adele fans, and like, hey, I'm not going to complain about that. So it's been pretty cool. So like that, having that common interest, especially too, like I remember when I took my first songwriting course when I was 17. That was the first time I was in a room with people who had the same interests. Like I went to a really rural small school where there were 10 kids in my entire class, so nobody else played music, and so to have that bond with people is pretty special, and I think that really made a difference.
Yeah. And then how do you take that enthusiasm for doing cover tunes and then translate that into, now you're going to write your own songs without them feeling like, oh, can't we just do cover stuff that we have fun doing? Like, we need to really start putting ourselves under a microscope and laying ourselves bare. I mean, how do you carry that same enthusiasm through? I'm
not 100% sure. It is a bit difficult, because because it's, I think everyone here is obviously a music lover, and so to transfer that over into a songwriter, I don't know, that's a difficult process, but people have been doing pretty well.
Do you? I sense that you probably find a pretty easy way to communicate what would work better for a lyric when you're talking to these kids, rather than just saying, no, that's terrible, that won't work. I mean, obviously you're not here to crush dreams, right? So how do you encourage them without discouraging them?
Oh yeah, that's I hope I'm doing an okay job at that. Like especially when we were doing the group song, there were a lot of opinions and a short amount of time and one goal. So that was a hard thing to navigate. And I was really tired and hungry afterwards. Like all that creative energy. I was like, wow, I need some carbs. Well, I try to, I guess I will never say I don't like that. I just think that just like shuts the gate of creativity. Like, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's just a negative thing. It's just like, it's an uncreative way of giving feedback. I just immediately will focus on something positive, and there always is something. Like there's always like a gem in an idea. Like there really is. And so I encourage them to develop on it, I suppose. Always say something positive and make a suggestion. I think that's the best way that I've found to give any kind of criticism. But yeah, you still have to, especially when you're writing a group song, like you still have to give some direction and whatnot.
Right.
But
Do you find, as a musician, is it difficult to marry their musical ability with what it is that they want to write? I mean, some of them have written some pretty profound things about grandparents dying and bullying and things like that. So is it tough to take a profound lyric and then meet them where they're at musically, to know whether they're capable of playing that riff or... You know what I mean? Like, is that hard for you as a musician?
Well, I know what you mean, but I came at music from a very like songwriter's perspective.
Okay.
Like, I feel like if you have the right emotion and if you can't sing a note and if you can't play anything and if you're just singing it a cappella and if it's out of tune, if you have the right feeling, I'm a feelings kind of person. So if you just have the right feeling for that note, it's just, I don't know. We're not. This is not American Idol.
It doesn't have to be perfect,
and it doesn't have to be perfect. And there's a lot of character in the imperfection. So yeah. I feel like the thing that I strive for as a songwriter in this environment is just to encourage people to just be as genuine and as honest with themselves as they can, and also the other side of that too is maybe leave a little bit for yourself. Like, I always encourage students that I'm working with. I remember someone told me a long time ago, there are two kinds of songs. There are ones that you write for yourself, that's therapeutic, helps you work through things. And then there's the other kind that you perform for people. And sometimes they're the same, but sometimes they're not. And so at this time, especially when you're a young songwriter, it's really hard to tell the difference, but it's something to be mindful of, because you want to be like open and honest with an audience, but you got to keep something for yourself too. And that's, I'm speaking from experience there, or it's like, I've kind of like put too much out there sometimes,
Yeah.
So, those are things to be mindful of, I suppose.
What surprised you so far in this process? I mean,
I was actually surprised with how quickly friendships were made, because, we didn't, like, these were a group of kids that didn't have a pre-existing clique or anything. Like, they weren't from the same, well, some kids were from the same school, but that wasn't something that kept them isolated from others. Like, people have really made some genuine friendships, which has really been neat to observe. So I think the amount of jamming that happened, especially the first weekend, like really, really blew me away. It was pretty neat to see them bonding over music like that. So I think that's probably what's blown me away the most. And their genuine enthusiasm for playing music. Like, it's nice to be reminded of why you play, just that almost like, well, like nobody who's taking the program is pursuing music full time yet. So there's just like, there's still that like pure love of it. And that's really inspiring. Old farts like us need to be around that every now and then, just to be like, oh yeah, that's why we do this, right? That's why I don't have dental, right? No.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You kind of answered my next question, which is, what have they taught you? But maybe what they've taught you is to just re-engage with what it is that you've taken for granted.
Yeah, totally. Like a reminder, like, hey, my life is actually like pretty sweet. Like, I get to play so much music all the time, and like, it's sure, it can be challenging, like any lifestyle can be, but it's like, it's pretty great. I think, they've reminded me of that pure love of playing. Yeah.
What would you hope that they take away from the end of this entire process?
Man, it sucks being a teenager, It's like, it wasn't that long ago, and I remember like, that pressure you feel at the end of grade 12 to like, what are you going to do after, how are you going to make money? How are you going to do that? And what I hope is that they won't abandon their creativity, because the real world, those bills do come, and all that, rent comes, and school loans and all those sorts of things. And I feel like it's really easy for us to get distracted from that pure love of music, or also that creative state that we all are. We're all creative beings, and folks will come up to me after shows. Oh, I wish I had that creativity you do. It's like, well, you do. You do. Yeah. And it's just, if this weekend can just remind everybody to keep in touch with that, regardless of what life path you go down, because I don't expect everybody here to be, full-time singer-songwriters in 10 years. Like, I don't expect that, but if that can still be a part of their lives, and even, some of the creative processes we've talked about over the weekends, if that can be incorporated into whatever they're doing down the road, whether it's like writing writing grants or whatever it could be. Like, there's just like, I hope that they take some of that creative process with them.
Yeah. Yeah. You obviously hope that this continues beyond this stage, that this kind of program can get repeated.
Oh yeah, I do, because this kind of program is what I was drawn to when I was younger. Like this, like I took a songwriting course through the University of Saskatchewan when I was 17. I was in my grade 12 last year of high school, and everyone was looking at me, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I was like, I think I'm going to write songs. And they're like, that doesn't count. But I felt like, no, I want to do this. And I remember driving up Saskatoon by myself, and from Mortlach, that was a big deal, you know,
Yeah.
driving the car up to the city by myself, and Kim Fontaine and David J. Taylor and Jay Semko were putting on the workshop. And I remember not only did I learn a ton about songwriting, but also a lot about the industry and the different mindsets. Like that was the first time I heard, you know, being based in rural Saskatchewan can actually be a good thing for an artist because it's inexpensive and you usually can find spaces to rehearse and things like that. Like just these mindsets that I never would have thought about. Like it just really broadened my mind. And if that can help other students on their path, because there's not like you don't just go to the U of R for songwriting for 4 years or, you know, something like that. Like this is an alternative, it's a different kind of process. And so, yeah, it's nice to learn what's a bridge, what's a verse, what's a chorus, but it's even almost at times more important to just hang out with other folks that are pursuing a career that maybe you would like to. Like I got to experience that by hanging out with Jay Semko and David and Kim. And that's pretty priceless. And to be able to offer that to students in Saskatchewan too is pretty special. So regardless, like I know I'm getting busier with my touring, and I don't know what's going to happen in the next few months here, but to be able to have been involved with the program this far, I feel really blessed for. And regardless if I'm involved or not, I just hope that it keeps happening because I think it's really important for the youth of this province to have programs like this.
On to you for a sec. Things are going good, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited.
You're crazy busy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting actually the time of my life and how this program is wrapping up when it is and how other things are starting to take off. But it's it's been a really interesting process. And I think a grounding one for me too, like that reminder of why I got into things, especially before I get busier with it. I think it's a pretty special thing to have. Yeah.
And you've stayed here, and you've purposely stayed in this province.
In Saskatchewan, yes. Yeah. And I still don't have any regrets about that, you know. It is this being based out of rural Saskatchewan has been a great benefit to me for a few reasons.
Why?
One, inexpensive. Two, sense of community, grounding. You know, I'm not around folks all the time that are like building up my ego or, you know, it's just like, Megan, what are you bringing to the potluck? You know, and it's just nice to be around folks like that.
Yeah.
And also to not always be around people who want to talk shop, right?
Yeah.
Like I do want to try to have like a balance in life.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to be a songwriter that's always writing songs about writing songs because that's my whole world, right? Like I need to have other parts of life. And I feel like the community I've involved myself in has allowed that. Also, it's a story. Like saying, well, I live in an apartment with 5 other people in Toronto. Like that's not it's not as, you know, like that's common where it's like, oh, I live in a little hamlet in the middle of nowhere and I write songs in a church. Like people are kind of like, well, what's that about? So I think that's been a benefit too. So it's been interesting. And also folks I've played festivals in Saskatchewan too. I was singing at Ness Creek a couple of years ago, and then Steve Johnson from Merlefest heard me, and I just got back from North Carolina a few days ago. I played Merlefest right before the Avett Brothers. Like it was awesome, and I got that opportunity from playing a festival in Saskatchewan. So it's like I will like challenge anybody any day who's like, you got to go to Toronto, you got to, you know. I'll be like, well. Yeah, you do have to go play there for sure. Yeah. But you don't have to base yourself out of there. Yeah. No way.
And you can stay in Canada and still have a career.
I think so. But you have to tour. You know.
Yeah. Are there days when you just don't want to sing? Like you don't want music to be a part of your day at all?
Well, no. Like there are days I have to take vocal rests on purpose because
Yeah.
I've over singing in the years,
Yeah.
over the years. But I love singing and I love writing songs. But I do listen to a lot of talk radio in the car, though. I think I listen to a lot of music live, and so actually I've been listening to more
I
podcasts.
love talk radio. I listen to more talk radio than I do music.
Yeah.
Music gets me sometimes anxious about what I should be doing next.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I can relate to that. But it's nice too. Like music can be inspiring, but talk radio can be inspiring too. I like to listen to a lot of comedians as well because I like to. I really like comedy, and I like to try to incorporate a bit into my set. I don't want to be too like here's another sad song, here's another sad song.
Yeah.
I want to be a bit uplifting. So it's listen to a lot of talk.
What would you do if you didn't do this? If somebody took it all away from you, what would you want to do?
Oh, gosh. I've actually kind of thought about this because it's like singing and playing live is such a physical thing.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like I'm not trying to be, negative, but I've thought, like, what if I couldn't, what if I did lose my voice? What if I, like thinking about those things. And even if everything stopped right now, I would still look back and be like, you know what? I did my best, and it was a pretty cool ride. So that's not what I want to do. I don't want to stop now, but I do try to take moments to celebrate the things along the way.
Yeah. Well, who wants to look back and go, woulda, coulda, shoulda, eh?
Yeah, no.
You might as well give it the old college try.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's so great to finally meet you.
Yeah, really great to meet you too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
In your pockets or under your bed lies a tied up wad of everything unsaid.
I'm sitting outside, and it is so beautiful this weekend, and you'll hear the sound of birds chirping away in the background, which is as it should be, since we're in Birdland. And I am sitting with Carrie. Carrie, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Carrie Hecker.
And so tell me about the work that you do here. You actually live out here. We're looking at your house as we talk.
It's kind of an unusual situation. The easiest way to explain it is I run a wildlife ranch that's 40,000 acres.
How does somebody stumble into running a wildlife ranch?
A lot of serendipity, being in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
I would have actually liked to be in real ranching, but wasn't in the right family situation for it. Didn't get born into a ranching family.
Okay. Were you born here?
I was born in Swift Current and grew up in Maple Creek, which is a lovely place to grow up in. And then we moved to Regina when I was about 13. And then through lots of great outdoor experiences and a bunch of good teachers, especially biology teachers, thank you, Mr. Brooks, we ended up being so keen on biology that I went and got a biology degree at the University of Regina. Okay. And Mark Brigham there is inspiring. And so, continued on in biology, worked on a bunch of cool jobs in amazing places, and then decided I wanted to settle a little closer to where I consider home because I really missed Saskatchewan. And my husband's from Strasbourg, which is not too far from here.
Right.
And so when the job came open here to be a grassland restoration technician, and it was just my skill set. It was only a 3-year job, but we jumped at the chance and got to move out closer to his family and have a really neat job in a really neat place. And then, just as my 3-year term was coming to an end, the manager before me decided it was time for him to move on, and the job here came open. And for some reason, Environment Canada decided that they wanted a plant biologist to run a bird sanctuary. But they tell me after the fact that it's always, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
If you have the right habitat, the birds will come and live in it. And so that's how I got here. And 13 years later, I'm still living on site, and I can't think of a better place to work. More interesting work to do. It's very diverse, and there's far too much work to ever accomplish, But that's part of the challenge, is to figure out what needs doing most. And
what does a day in the life of Carrie look like doing this kind of job?
Well, it really depends what season it is. This is a hugely seasonal job, as with many outdoor jobs. But you'll have noticed there's a big area that's completely black out into the south from here. And it was only last week. Wow. It was 8 days ago that I took my 6 trained crew members out, and we did a prescribed burn. And so we lit up the prairie and let it burn in a nice slow back burn for about, what did we do? We did about 650 acres that day. And prairie fire is a natural process in how prairie evolved. Since the last glaciers retreated, prairie fires have been going through here, I don't know, probably on average every 3, 5, 10 years.
Naturally.
Right. It may have been lightning. It may have been anthropogenic, so First Nations. And it doesn't really matter, because that's what influenced the prairie to become what it is. So if we want to keep it in good shape for the critters that live here, whether it's birds or mammals or even the bugs, which are very important, we've got to have those same processes on the landscape. And the other process that's just as important as fire, and is a little easier to use, actually, it's a little less dangerous and more easy to control, is grazing. And there used to be millions of bison that would make a big circuit through the plains of the United States and Canada, or what's now United States and Canada, plus all the deer, the elk, the moose, the antelope. And you can't forget the smaller grazers, like grasshoppers and gophers. They're all grazers. So the prairie's evolved with grazing as well. And now, when we've got private property and fences and roads where we have to keep things hemmed in, and of course we lost the great herds of bison back in the late 1800s, we have to use a proxy. And our proxy right now is cows and horses, and sometimes sheep and goats. Not very often, because some of the wildlife out here, like coyotes, enjoy eating sheep and goats. And they're a little smaller and more susceptible to it. But yeah, we have fire and grazing here. So after I did the prescribed burn, the next day I actually went out on an ATV with one of our patrons who brings cattle to graze the wildlife area for us. They pay a fee that's set by market rates to have their animals on the grass here. And in return for that, we actually get the grazing that we need to keep the grasslands healthy. So I met with that guy to figure out, which areas we're going to graze this year, what his requirements might be, and how we wanted it grazed for the benefit of wildlife. So that's the beginning of the season. I work for Environment and Climate Change Canada in the Canadian Wildlife Service. So unfortunately, we have lots of paperwork to be transparent, accountable, and responsible. And I take tour groups out to show them the wonders of this place, because it is pretty wonderful. And if you have somebody to point out some of the subtleties, it's a lot more fun. The prairies aren't quite as showy and spectacular as the mountains, where you just look at them and they take your breath away. It's kind of like the people of Saskatchewan. We may not be the loudest and most boisterous, but there's a lot under the surface and a lot of interesting things to discover. So I like to do that with groups, take them out and show them all the interesting things. And I'm a generalist rather than a specialist, so I know about mammals and birds and bugs and plants and lichens and soil fungus and how all these things interact and how the water interacts. So it's quite fun to take a part of the picture and explain it. And
people probably don't realize how what's the word? How one thing affects another thing in this whole ecosystem. That is just perfection when it works. And if you take one thing out,
or add one thing in,
it
messes it all up. Yeah, it's really hard for humans to comprehend, I think. Some of the wisest ecologists I know are actually cattle ranchers from southwestern Saskatchewan. I'm thinking of you, Eric Lawrence. And he's the Environmental Stewardship Award winner from a couple of years ago. And he's on horseback out there riding the range with his cattle at whatever hour of the day, and he's a great observer and just soaks it in. So he could probably teach you more or less lessons about prairie ecology than most academics could. He's just in tune with what's around him. But a game that I often play with the kids, we all stand in a circle and we throw a ball of string to one to the other, and we each hang on to a piece of the string. And when we've each got string in both hands, and we randomly have tossed it back and forth, so we're connected to various people, we each pick a thing that we're going to be. So we've got grasshoppers and grass, and a Sprague's pipit, which is a little grassland songbird, and an eagle, and a bug, and all sorts of things that would be part of the ecosystem. I'm like, okay, well, let's see. Now, let's go and, say, spray some Roundup to get rid of this vegetation here. So, grass, and you pull the person back and say, hang on to the string, and then we see who else gets tugged forward by the string. And some that are directly connected get tugged pretty hard, but everybody feels it in their hands, no matter where they are or what they are in the circle. So it's one of the easiest ways of having that object lesson of not a food chain, but a food web. And everything is interconnected. And sometimes it's not entirely logical how those connections work, but you do know you will have an effect if you poke this one particular part of it. So it's hard to wrap your head around, though.
It's very hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And in the most casual things that we do, you must have to really kind of wake yourself up to a whole new way of looking at things.
Yes. Something that just evoked in my memory was I went out to check one of the areas that people like to use. We keep a garbage can there and a little picnic table. And I was walking along, and people had been fishing in the lake right there. And it's a nice spot. Really beautiful spot. And I saw a bird up ahead. I'm like, oh, there's a blackbird sitting down on the berm there. And get closer, it jumps up and flutters and goes back down again. Jumps up and flutters, goes back down again. Starting to think this is peculiar behavior. It's not some sort of courtship display.
Yeah.
And I got closer, and it got more frantic, but it was doing the same motion. And here, someone's fishing line had got snarled, and so they cut it instead of and just left it there. And this blackbird had gotten its feet tangled in the fishing line, and was jumping up and down. And she'd get to the end of the fishing line, get yanked back down again. And so I got her released. She wasn't damaged, hadn't been there for very long, thankfully, and picked up the snarl of fishing line and went away and watched her for a bit. Well, she had a nest about 6 feet away from it. And they eat bugs. So they're eating bugs, and the fishermen like to go fishing there. And all of a sudden, all these things come together that's where the fish come to the surface, because the bugs are landing on the surface and they like to eat the bugs. And this blackbird likes to eat the bugs, and they nest right on the ground. And suddenly this whole juxtaposition comes together, and somebody inadvertently was going to, kill a mama bird and get rid of her whole nest of eggs and everything, and they're long gone, maybe even 6 months long gone, and wouldn't even know about it. So the ripple effects of having a frustrating moment when you're fishing are not what you would think.
What's it like not having neighbors? Or neighbors within spitting distance, for sure.
Closest is 2.5 miles away.
On a gravel road,
on a gravel road,
add.
Yeah, unless you count the birds.
Right.
But, when I was pregnant with my kids, that was sort of a concern in the back of my head always. Like, what'll happen if I need help in the middle of a blizzard? We're not very close to anybody. But it's not for everyone. It really isn't. It's fairly isolated, and we have to be quite self-sufficient. And until we got used to the fact that none of the gas stations were open past 6 o'clock on a weekday, you get caught short a few times and you learn pretty quick. But it's, for my husband and I and our kids, we just love it out here. We really do.
What an amazing experience for your kids to be growing up in.
I can't think of a better place to raise 2 little boys. But honestly, I sometimes wonder in the back of my mind, how this is shaping them, that it's going to be such a different experience than the majority of the world. And what is that going to be? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Are they going to just have a really different perspective? Is it going to be detrimental, or is it going to be something that makes them stand out and do interesting things later in life?
Yeah, you must think about the socialization aspect or the lack thereof on a greater scale other than what they know.
No, it's even the socialization aspect for myself.
Yeah.
We don't get out much.
What happens in the wintertime? You must see some fierce snowstorms.
The last few years in particular, we haven't had a lot of snow. But
do you work through the wintertime as well?
Yes. Yeah, we're full-time year-round.
Right, because the birds are migrating all through winter period?
Well, they pretty much finish migrating out of here by November-ish.
Okay.
Depends on the year.
Right.
And they start coming back in, the first Canada geese will be back in maybe March. The horned larks come before then, but they start nesting in crazy winter conditions. And yeah, we're not just here for the birds, and we are government, so we do field work through the summer, during the growing season, during the season when the birds are here. And then in the winter, that's when we do all our human resources stuff and financial reporting and program reporting and hiring for the next year and budgeting and all that kind of stuff. Right. So it is very, very seasonal work. Right.
So speaking of how this is influencing your kids, here we are on a weekend that involves young people. What was your part in this entire process?
A facilitator, I think. We actually got some funds to give to other organizations for mutual benefits. So we're trying to make a win-win happen. And I actually went to grad school with Glenn Suter from the Royal Saskatchewan Museum in Mark Brigham's lab. Yeah, I was a lowly undergraduate, and he was finishing his PhD. And so when I heard about this project that we could do, one of my first partners that I thought of was like, well, I've got money for something interesting. Who would do work of connecting Canadians to nature, especially urban Canadians, with a high-quality, intensive interaction that will make bonds with nature that will influence you the rest of your life, and yet not be detrimental to the nature? Like if we brought a lot of vehicles through here for, I don't know, even something like really popular geocaching or Pokemon Go or something. It's low-quality traffic, right? They're after something, and once they get it, they're gone. They're not going to sit around and actually look at what's here necessarily.
Please tell me no one's come out here to play Pokemon Go.
Not that I know of.
Okay, good.
If they have, I haven't found out about it.
That's sacrilege.
I don't know much about it, and I don't want to. So,
no.
But yeah, it's... So I asked the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, where I have acquaintances from my past, and what would you guys do? Like, we have mutual goals, and you guys are in an urban area. I want to bring people out. What kind of group could we bring that we're not preaching to the choir, that we're not bringing out the bird watchers to the bird sanctuary, because we already have those people on board? Who could we logically and easily connect with nature that might not otherwise get out here? And Glenn Suter really came through for us. He's got two hats. He's got a PhD in biology and is the curator of human ecology at the museum.
Yes, he's a former guest on that exact thing.
And when he puts his other hat on, his funky hat, he is a really good blues musician and singer-songwriter, and has a band and tours, and it's a lot of fun. So he did swear that he was never going to mix the two parts of his life, but he made an exception, which I'm very grateful for, and so should everyone involved in this program be. And so he suggested, well, let's bring in the arts. The arts is always inspired by nature, especially the capital R romantic side of things. And let's bring out artists. And so we kept on discussing this and realized that we better give ourselves a small bite to bite off for the first project. And so, all right, I know singer-songwriters the best. Let's try that and see if we can't put together kind of a curriculum, a format, a way of doing this that would work for more than just songwriting. But that'll be our pilot project and see how this goes. And so then, do we work with adults or kids or both? Do we throw it open and have people register and pay? Do we go after kids in the school system? Because Ryan Hicks was really keen on this as well. He'd approached him already. We figured, you know what, let's go for kids in school. And so here we are with a bunch of really lovely teenagers who have such great attitudes and so much energy. At least now at 3 p.m, they have lots of energy.
Right. And I heard they had a lot of energy at the bonfire last night too.
They were a lot of fun at the bonfire last night.
They're teenagers.
Yes. Yeah. They're made for late nights and campfires.
Right.
And that's part of it. See, it's the ambience. It's being outside, burning a little wood and staring at the flames and just soaking in all the night sounds and smells and the companionship of the other people there. It's all part and parcel of the same deal, but gives you a huge appreciation for nature that you wouldn't have otherwise. Saw a couple of the kids going down the road with headlamps on to check out the stars, and then all of a sudden the headlamps go off.
Right.
And they realized there was enough moonlight last night that they could see where they were going. And, here's all these kids who live in the city who are out in the middle of nowhere. Like, there is not a farmyard light for probably 2.5 miles because we don't put the lights on here at night. And they've got their headlamps off, and whereas lots of other kids would be freaked out about, the coyote's going to come and eat me, they're wandering around enjoying the stars and just soaking it in. So these kids are, I don't know if they're peculiarly receptive. I like to think so, because they're into songwriting and music in a really deep and fervent way. And they really are soaking in this experience. It's really neat to see,
It must be very gratifying to, whether it be this experience or whether you're giving tours, to see what you have here through the eyes of somebody who's never experienced it before.
You're very perceptive. That's tremendously accurate, because when you're the manager of a site, it's your peculiar job to pinpoint what's wrong so you can fix it, or pinpoint what's lacking so that you can bring it in, so that lack doesn't lead to worse things. And so over the years especially, I find I'm focusing more and more on what's wrong and not celebrating and appreciating what's right. So that's what I value my interpretive work for, like working with school groups and birders groups and adult groups, artists and such that we're getting out this year, is they just appreciate it so much and they see it through new eyes. And if I just sort of stop talking and listen and watch their reactions, I can see that this is such an astonishing place. It always has been. There's a reason why there's a bird sanctuary here, and has been. They set it aside in 1887.
Amazing. Before
there was ever a conservation ethic. They still thought the wildlife was endless back then. But they set it aside for wild fowl. And I'm sure it was a hot spot for birds before then too. So it's an amazing place, and I have the real privilege of living, which is awesome, living and working here, and getting to interact with both the other staff here who are awesome, and all the visitors who make their way out to this place. And it has to be intentional. You can't really just stop.
This is not a place
through.
You happen upon. You need to know you're coming here.
No, and we're working on getting a better presence on the web and or social media so that we are a little bit more findable, or people can figure out that this place exists, that we can attract the high quality interactions that we're looking for.
So it's quite the opposite than from wanting people to stay away so as to not upset the balance.
We've got to strike a balance, because if we brought too many people in, pretty much every time a vehicle drives down the road here, you're putting the critters here at risk. Coyote pups are silly and go on the road and get hit by vehicles, and the little birds in particular, the youngs from this year, the juveniles will do silly things and get smacked by cars. But if you don't bring people in, they don't get to appreciate this amazing natural spot. It's a democracy. If people don't value nature, the government isn't going to value nature, and our whole society will just leave it behind.
Right.
So, creating those high-quality relationships. In fact, I don't want a lot of casual visitors. I want a moderate number of people that are really invested and come for a whole weekend and camp and learn songwriting and see the world through a different lens for a little while and build a little relationship. So that's why Trish's research is going to be so interesting. As went through all the permissions and approvals to actually be able to do surveys with kids to see if this experience is deepening or changing their experience of and perception of nature. And that's going to be really valuable for Environment Canada as well, because if it turns out that's the effective way to connect people, then we can put more time and effort into building those relationships in a more meaningful way rather than just, come on out and visit. We're having cake this afternoon at the wildlife area.
Yeah, right.
Which we do occasionally too. But
do you have a musical background at all?
Sort of. I sang in choirs. I play trumpet. I picked up my granddad's accordion and play that a bit. So, and I love to sing around a campfire. I don't play guitar or banjo, and I don't write songs the way these gifted kids do. Much less the songwriters who are the instructors for this, who just blow me away. And shout out to Megan Nash, whose voice just sends chills up and down my arms when I get to listen to her sing. So we've got a really talented group here, and I have enough musical background to appreciate it, perhaps fully.
Right.
But
what would you like them to come away with at the end of this experience?
The students?
Yeah.
A worldview that involves nature as an essential part of it. Whether it's inspiration, relaxation, recreation, the ability to appreciate nature, and maybe look a little deeper or see all the parts that are around them instead of just, walking through it on their way from point A to point B. I think that would be it. That's from a nature point of view. And from a youth development point of view, to get together with a bunch of other songwriters around their age, and I think, as Ryan says, geek out on music for a weekend, to realize that they're not the only people in the world that work that way, because you can feel pretty isolated as a teenager when you're starting to feel your own way in the world and make your own place. To realize there's others that think and act and like things the same way you do has got to be really, really enormously valuable. I wish I'd had something like that happen when I was a teenager.
For people who won't have the opportunity to come here because this podcast gets listened to around the world, what's the overriding thing that, the takeaway you want to have listeners know about the work that you're doing yes, you've talked about it on a local level, but on a global scale, this kind of work. What's your biggest fear of the direction the planet's heading, and in a perfect world, what would you like to have people wake up and see and acknowledge and get? Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
It's really big picture. We can't do without nature. We've got lots of technology that can replace parts of it, from water filtration and air filtration to creating synthetic compounds that mimic what are found and grown in nature. We could probably create artificial habitats for ourselves that would be sufficient, but not at a global scale. So we need nature for our own comfort and our own quality of life as we have it.
That's great. That's what this weekend's all about.
Isn't it? And if we don't keep nature working properly and give it space to do so, we're going to only hurt ourselves. I hate to say it, but if you look at the history of our world and everything from the single-celled critters that crawled out of ponds and started life on Earth, to the dinosaurs, age of mammals, all the way through to what we are right now, I'm pretty sure even if the whole world goes up in a nuclear holocaust, the cockroaches would then take over, and we'd have the age of cockroaches.
Right.
And the world would continue on just fine. So
would your job.
Exactly.
You just focus on different research.
Different things, yeah. So we're not saving the planet. No, we're saving our own lifestyle and how we live. And the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, everything that sustains our life is dependent on nature, one way or another. And if we compromise that, people we're hurting is ourselves. And that goes for everything from climate change and rising sea levels. It's just hurting us. The water levels don't really matter to the critters out there. They'll just move to the more appropriate habitat as it changes. We're just hurting ourselves, so it behooves us to take a closer look at it and maybe give nature a little more space and not crowd it quite so much or use it quite so intensively. Yeah. And that message of connectedness, where everything is connected, we're connected internationally. We've had some accidental migrants from Europe over here this year. So
really,
birds that got blown off course in migration aren't supposed to be in North America. They showed up.
So that's not anything that man screwed up, or
it's probably a big weather system that blew them off course. Wow. And when you're a bird flying for days at a time, a really heavy-duty weather system can take you hundreds and hundreds of kilometers off course.
Do they stay?
They might. In fact, they might actually do, they stay where they stay, with some similar North American species, perhaps. Hang out. If they survive for the summer, when they migrate, they might have the navigational system to go back where they came from. But wildlife have kind of a peril-filled existence as it is, and surviving for a year is pretty substantial accomplishment for most wildlife. Yeah. But so we're connected globally. We're connected through all sorts of pathways, whether it be the air that circulates in the jet stream, the oceans that circulate, the birds that migrate, and the things in the water that migrate. And whatever we do in one part of the planet affects things elsewhere.
Yeah. Mindful meditation is such a big buzzword right now. Everybody's talking about mindful meditation and taking time to step outside. You are living mindful meditation. That is the.
I'm not recognizing the catchphrase, but.
Oh no!
Yes, no,
it's all the buzz now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
to take 2 or 3 minutes out at the beginning of the day to just pay attention to your breath and to just dial it down and just be. Somehow I can't help but think there's a part of your life that gets to be just like that.
We get busy and frantic the same as everybody else, but yes, it is very grounded and centered. And if you just stop for a second and suck in a deep breath and open your senses up a little, well, you can hear the wind in the leaves and the grass, and you see the things blowing and the butterflies flittering around, and hear all the birds and the rustlings around you. You can feel the air moving on your skin, you feel the rain dropping, whatever it is. You feel the cold attacking your face. Perhaps it's much easier to be mindfully meditative here.
That's a pretty good sales pitch right there for a reason to come.
Yeah. Even if you just drop in for a couple of hours, it's a wonderful, wonderful place to experience. I will caution people, though, if you're here to see birds, dusk and dawn is by far the best time of day to see them.
Right.
We get quite a few visitors who come from the nearby cities of Saskatoon and Regina. They travel for 2 hours to get out here. And then they're here from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m., the hottest, sunniest, windiest part of the day.
Yeah.
And then they stop in the office and I'm like, this is a bird sanctuary. I thought we were supposed to see like lots and lots of birds here. And I'm like, well, they're all having siestas or hiding in the reeds because it's too hot or taking shelter somewhere. So dusk and dawn are definitely the birding times of day to come here. They're very alive. The kids actually experienced that this morning. I think one of them actually went out with his recorder. If you can believe it, a teenager got up at 4:30 in the morning to go and hear the dawn chorus of birds. It's really cool, but I didn't expect anybody to get up for that, so I'm impressed.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What a fascinating life you live.
Thank you. I like to think so.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the part you've played in giving these kids this experience.
No thanks necessary. I'm so grateful for the group of people who came up with this brainwave and ran with it. All I've done is be as supportive as I can. And Environment Canada has supplied the money, and this project is so cool.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be the end of it either. By hook or by crook, we'll figure out a way to keep the heart of this going. I'm not sure what form it'll take in the future, but I think this is a keeper.
Here's to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie.
My
Good
pleasure.
to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you.
We talk all day.
Oh, fading slowly.
It's the last day of this fabulous weekend. It's hard to believe it's come to an end. And I'm sitting here with one of the people responsible for making this whole thing happen, Ryan.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you holding up?
I'm really good, actually. I wouldn't say I thrive under camping situations, but slept great, feeling good, lots of energy, feeling much better than I thought I'd be after a couple days of sleeping on the ground and being outside. No, it's good.
What parts of this weekend have exceeded your expectations?
How much the students were willing to give. When we first met them, in September, we literally first met them. I mean, we put a call out last year for people that were interested and got some emails back and corresponded, but never met face to face.
Right.
And in September, when we were loading the bus, was the very first time I met these kids. When we were here in September, we talked a lot about songwriting. We talked a lot about like why it's important to do songs. And they were like, yeah, for sure. We're like, okay, who wants to share their song? Nobody, like tumbleweed. And it wasn't that they didn't have songs, I don't think, or it wasn't that they didn't want to, but I think they really had to kind of like feel that it was a safe space and feel comfortable with us and feel comfortable with each other before they shared that stuff, because all the songs that they're writing were very, very personal songs. So I found the first time around that Glenn and Megan and I were sharing a lot of our stories, sharing a lot about our process, but not that the students weren't participating, but they weren't giving back. Whereas with this time, Megan, Glenn, and I have shared songs very little. Like, it's all coming from the students, and they're excited to share their stuff. They're proud of their stuff. They want, they're nervous about presenting it because it's, they would much rather do a cover of like an Adele song and sing that for each other, because there's not really a personal investment in it, whereas when you've written the words, you've written the melodies, this is your story, you're putting yourself out there. And that's a very difficult thing, whether you're 15 years old or, an adult or whoever, right?
Yeah. How much of that is the environment that we're in here and the unique opportunity they've had. I mean, you're a music teacher,
yeah.
So could this be accomplished within your day-to-day school routine of teaching music? Could you?
Not at all.
Yeah.
And it's not anything against the schools or what it is, but
Right.
what it is like if I can talk physically what these kids look like. When they came here on the Friday and went back in September, everybody kind of looked uptight and small, like, the shoulders together, kind of a little hunched over, kind of like very much a protecting thing, like you're protecting yourself. And they moved kind of like that. And then you saw after a day, people start to relax, shoulders are back, they're standing taller. And it is the environment. It's getting outside, and what's really cool about this place is it's a safe spot. So if they want to go walk, into, a kilometer this way and go, look at birds over here or go here, they can do that, and they need to do that. And they come back, feeling good, feeling, confident about themselves, and then they're ready to share. Whereas in the confines of a classroom, you don't have that. You've got a 15-minute period and you're under the gun. It's like, okay, well, we've got to get this done. We've got to do that. And it's, very hard for students to kind of feel comfortable with each other enough to share that sort of thing. So I do songwriting all the time with my students, but it is a very difficult thing for them to share. And also the product that I get, not that it's not good, it's good, but these students definitely go deeper, as you said, once they have relaxed. And I think that's exactly the reason why we come here. It is the environment. Absolutely, it's the environment. I know for me, I have to get outside. Like I get, really nervous and uptight if I've been inside so long. I need to get outside, and it's such a beautiful open space here. There's not like majestic mountains or this big flowing river, but it's just the open space and the quietness that I really appreciate. It's not the most obvious thing when you walk, when you get here,
right.
But to really embrace the stillness and the solitude and the open space. And I need that, and I know the students need that, and we're getting amazing things from them because of it.
What does it give you? What do they give you? I mean, as a musician, as an artist yourself, you've been involved in the nuts and bolts of making this all come together. But on a personal level, what do they give you?
Well, on a practical level, I'm totally stealing their good ideas. They've got great melodies and great ideas for lyrics, and so I'm not. I know a good melody or good riff when I hear it, so I'm going to totally steal from them.
Right.
I'm not above that. But what I do get from them is really the reason that I got involved in the project. I think it's important to do songwriting from a practical thing, but more important, I have a real personal interest in creating a nurturing environment for creativity, and that's really creating a safe space. And I think it's nice that we're teaching kids how to write songs, but what I think has been the biggest difference after going through this is that these kids are really growing as people.
Right.
They're kind of looking in the mirror, dealing with themselves. All of us have our own issues, anxiety, we want to do well. And so the pressure that we put on ourselves, whether it's academically or in all areas of our life, and that pressure can build up, and that can, be really hard, whether you're an adult or whether you're 14 years old. And what I'm seeing from these kids is they're really growing. They're becoming more confident. They're becoming more, comfortable in their own skin. They can let their guard down. And what's cool about these students is they come from all walks of life, a little bit eccentric, and that's awesome. We embrace that. And what's cool is that the other kids embrace that, because I'm a high school teacher, and, when you're a little bit, not different, but, a little bit more eccentric, that can be a really tough thing to walk around in high school like that. Kids aren't necessarily accepting of differences, let's put it that way, so it's really cool to see, even though they're all strangers to each other, embrace each other. They became, friends quickly. And the biggest thing for me, besides obviously, young songwriters, is that they're becoming, better people. They're more comfortable. And I see that. And what's nice is just hearing back from their teachers or hearing back from their parents, all the good things that they're doing at home and all the good things that they're doing in their communities. It's, really cool to see that. And I'm not going to say, oh, that's 100% because of songwriting for nature, but it's cool to see the growth in these kids. And now that it has been a few months, because we saw them in September and here we are in May, they've really come a long way, all of them.
How do you stay out of their way, as a musician, when you're working with them and giving them ideas? How do you step back enough so that you don't find yourself writing the piece for them?
Yeah. Trust. And I mean, that's actually, you know, what at least for me, you'd have to ask Megan and Glenn what they feel. I feel I've done very little with them this weekend. And that's good, you know, because like they're good. You know, they don't need me to step in and like fix a chorus or fix this. Like they're good. I can definitely give them some direction. Like, you know, this is a really good line. This line really stands out. Let's kind of develop that, or that isn't that so catchy, that's really memorable, that might work really well for the chorus instead of the verse. So I can kind of give them some guidance. But I found that this weekend I've been very hands off, and it's not because I don't want to help them, but I think it's helping them more to just let them go,
right?
You know, and to trust the process and trust them, and that takes confidence in yourself as a songwriter, that you don't have to go in and fix that, but to let them just do their thing and not have to go in and do it, because it doesn't need to be fixed. It's great. I mean, what's really cool is, you know, I've been recording, you know, students that have been in here, and I've had to make very little suggestion other than like, okay, let's try and keep a steady tempo, or let's make sure that ukulele is in tune. But it's not like, wow, you know, those words, they're not working.
Right.
You know, that melody, it's boring. It's like they've come up with great melodies and great lyrics.
Yeah. And they've not all been pressured to produce product? I mean, it's just sort of, or have they been?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we have a very practical reality in that we have a public performance on June 10th.
Right.
So there's a practical reality of we need to make sure that these songs are together and that they're well rehearsed and, you know, polished, and we don't see them from now to then. So we want to make sure that they are that, but also realizing that that's not nurturing creativity or providing the best environment. It's like, you need to finish your song now, because there's going to be a whole bunch of people in the audience. You don't, you know what I mean? So it's that fine balance of like a little gentle nudge, but still a gentle nudge to get them in the right direction. And, you know, what I found yesterday is that, you know, there was some students that just went away and you could see put pencil to paper and really working on their songs. And then there were students that went for a walk, or then there were students that were just kind of like playing hangman or just being kids, but also realizing that they need to be able to do that in order to relax and get comfortable and confident to work on their songs. So just like locking them in a room and say, going work on your songs is not moving forward on anything. And this is our last morning, and what I'm seeing is you can feel the creativity, like they're ready to go. Last night we gave a concert for each other where all the students got to share their songs, and that was really the first opportunity for many of them to perform from an audience and to share, and it was very positive. You know, everyone was saying great things about their things, and you could see that the smiles on their faces and the relief of like, oh, just finally getting that first one out of the way. So I mean, there's, again, you know, we want them to walk out of here with something finished, like finished product, you know, like a song they're happy with. And obviously you're going to tweak it, you're going to keep working on it, but not to come out here and go, well, what did I accomplish other than having a nice weekend? You know, you want songs, right?
Yeah. You could have chosen any area of this province to create a special weekend. What is it? I mean, obviously the initiative, the funding initiative, made this place the most, you know, happen the way it did. But what is it about this place in particular that is so unique to a songwriting process that you may not get from somewhere else?
For me, it's a little time capsule, because this is protected land, and it's not like you see a, you know, big housing development or a bunch of, you know, cell phone tower or this. It's just open prairie, the natural landscape. And there's something about it where you, like, everywhere that you walk and everywhere you look looks like untouched land. And you might have been the same, you know, perspective 5,000 years ago. That it just allows you to, I think, better connect with yourself, better connect with nature, and not be able to explain it. I mean, that's the thing for me is like, you know, growing up, I was a city kid. I never went out to the country. I didn't have, you know, family that were farmers or really have any connection to the land. But the older I get and the more I come out to places like this, I feel that call. Like, it feels like I know this place. I've been here before, but I know I haven't been here before. But it's like there's something deep there that's like, this is familiar. This is home. This is where it needs to be. And again, you know, I love the ocean and I love the mountains and I love beaches and I love all those big majestic things. And when you come here, it's a lot of open space. And I think at first you can go like, well, what's the what's the draw here? But it is that solitude. It is that open space. It's that quiet that you get here that really draws me in, and I think draws the kids in. And I think, kind of an aside, there was a time last year on the Billboard, Hot 100 on the top 10, where 6 out of the top 10 were all Canadian artists. And I think we have about 38 million people in Canada. There are more people in the state of California than there is in Canada. But yet it's somehow Canadians seem to dominate artistically, whether it's in film or whether it's in visual art or dance or music. And I really think that comes from, Canadians, having that open space. It kind of like allows the imagination to go places that they wouldn't necessarily, some of our most creative artists come from Canada. I'm not just talking about like singer, songwriter, folk things, like hip hop artists and stuff like that, really inventive, creative things. I think it's the open space that allows us that, more than say someone that was like surrounded by, skyscrapers their whole life.
Right. Was there anything about this weekend that didn't work the way that you'd hoped to? Well, I mean,
I'm a practical person. I think, okay, we get here, we've got stuff to do. Let's work on these songs. We want to be well rehearsed. Like the structure of like, let's sit down. So I know, like, for example, yesterday afternoon when I would see, kids not working on their songs, and it's not that they weren't, cooperating, not doing that, but it's like, dude, like, you've got a concert coming up. You've got to make sure that you're well rehearsed and that you're feeling good. And like, as nice as it is to, play cards or to, do this or do that, it's like we're not going to see each other again. You got to work on that. So there were times where I was like, I want you to go work on it. But I really think that they needed to do that in order to feel comfortable and confident. And that's the biggest thing that I found with all these kids is that there's no one that's in this group that's like overconfident. Like, what? You guys are so lucky to have me. I'm amazing. Just wait till you hear my songs. Like everyone's very shy. Everyone's very much to themselves. And that's awesome. That serves you well as far as writing songs. But as far as like, I feel for these kids because I'm sure that some of them don't have a necessarily easy time walking through this world.
Yeah.
And one of these things about, dealing with each other and working with each other, I think things make it easier to, for people to deal with other people. But a lot of these kids kind of live in their heads. It can be a tough thing as a high school student. But what I'm seeing this morning is everything's coming together. And this very much reminds me of our first time we got together. It was a songwriting camp. But there really wasn't a lot of songwriting happening. And then we thought, okay, we've got this scheduled time on Sunday morning. Let's write a song. So I was like, okay, guys, what are we going to do? Megan and Nash led the group. They're like, like, okay, let's brainstorm. What are some of the things that we saw? Birds, water. Like, it wasn't like flowing. And it was a real struggle for about an hour. Like, we were just like getting some words, like, it wasn't really clicking. And then we said, okay, we want your group to go do a first verse. We want your group to go do a second verse. We want to do that. And Megan kind of had an idea for a little melody that she started. And then all of a sudden, very quickly, within 20 minutes, we have the song Hourglass, like very quickly. And that was after like banging our heads against the wall for 2 hours trying to come up with a song. When it actually happened, it happened so quick. It was almost,
What do you attribute that to? I mean, was it the breaking off into groups that wasn't quite as intimidating? What was it?
You know what? I think there's so much of these things in this world that happen that I can't explain, and I'm okay with that. I don't think there's any one thing like, oh, it was the space, and it's like, you know what? It's just like the stars aligned, everything was where it needed to be at that moment, and that's when it happened. And there was a practical, thing for us, too, is we had a reporter coming from CBC, and he was scheduled to be here at a certain time, so we wanted to have this song ready. So it's like, okay, we need to go, guys. And as the minutes were ticking, it's like, we still don't have a song. But then something just happened, and the song was amazing. And literally, as he was driving up, we're all singing the song. We got it rehearsed, and it was fantastic. But, an hour before, it's like, we don't have anything yet.
The power of the deadline.
The Power of the Deadline, and that song, we all came up with, and I've listened back to it so many times, and it was very much of the moment. It was like, that's a really good song. There's a lot of lyrical depth to it. The melody's beautiful. There's a lot of, peaks and valleys emotionally in the song, and yet it was created very quickly. Like some people would probably love to have come up with a quality of that song, would spend months and months and months on it. Whereas with us, it wasn't easy, but it all came like that very quickly.
After the June concert happens, in a perfect world, where do you want to see this whole thing go?
In a perfect world, for me, the reason that I really got involved in it in the first place is to help kids. I mean, that's why I'm a teacher. Being a teacher is wonderful, but there's sure easier jobs out there. I just want to help kids. I mean, when I was a student, I didn't have an easy time myself in high school, and I really remember that kid who sat in that desk, and I think about that kid, and that was me at that point. And I think it's such a wonderful thing that we've done with helping these kids, and it's not that we have done it. They've done it for themselves. We've just kind of like opened this doorway to this wonderful room to play in. And I would love more students to have that opportunity. So, I mean, with anything, it's always practical things like money and budgets and stuff. And we're very lucky to have some funding for this. And we're at the point where now the funding has run out on that. And we're, looking for sources of funding and what can we do next. And I would love if we could keep it going if we found new funders or with existing funders, because it's such a great program and we've worked hard to kind of set it up. It's like not say it would be just the same every time, but we've got the program set that we'd love to have it running every year for new students. That I really like how we came in September, then come back in May. I love to help more kids with this.
You didn't have anything like this growing up? So.
No, nothing like this. Nothing like this. I would have loved to have been a student in this. Not that I was like hard up for experiences, but I mean, something like this just did not happen when I was a kid.
If a kid was listening who is in the same boat as you are, that just through circumstances of where they live in the province, there are no opportunities like this, and they hear something like this is happening, how do you get through to them that they don't have to be perfect, they don't have to be an accomplished musician, that there is something for them to learn where they're at now if the desire is there to be creative?
Right. Well, I think it's an act of bravery to say, I want to try something. It's so easy for us to go, oh, well, I guess that's not for me.
Right.
Like for me growing up, up until I was 13 years old, my dream was to be a professional baseball player. And then I kind of got bit really hard by the music bug and just fell in love with it. And it wasn't because of any competition or anything. It was just like I loved playing guitar and I loved writing songs. And that came from inside. And I think for a lot of these kids, that's kind of where it came from. It wasn't because, oh, this was a school project or it makes my mom happy if I write songs. It's like there's just something deep within them that they want to do this. And for that kid that's somewhere in the province or somewhere in the world that has that, it's about finding your voice. And, one of the things I talk to my students about is I'll say, okay, who has an Instagram account? And almost every kid does. And like, well, you're already artists because you're taking a second to say, this is something that I want the world to see. You're sharing your stuff, with these kids that I know, but like, they have the opportunity to share with the world, their voice, their perspective, whether that's a photograph or whether that's a song or a lyric or a painting or say the words they write for their own, drama. They really have the opportunity. And the thing is, you don't have to wait for a program. You don't have to wait for some, program to happen. You can start writing stuff at home. And something that history has taught us is the next big thing, like, for example, in music, is not something that's happening in a club right now. It's some teenager that's probably pretty isolated, making some beats in their basement, making something that nobody's heard yet. Probably has already played for people, and people said, that's terrible, that's not music. But yet 5 years from now, it's going to be the next big thing. And I know that's the case. So for anyone that's listening that's saying, well, how do I get started? Just get started. Start doing it. You can definitely start sharing stuff with things on SoundCloud or, anything. There's so many opportunities. But I think what prevents us is people say, well, I've got to wait for some program, or I've got to wait for this to happen in my school, or I've got to wait for someone that I meet is a musician that can teach me how to write songs. Don't just start.
Right. Once you catch up on your sleep tonight, tomorrow night, by Tuesday night when you're back in your bed, what are you going to miss the most?
I mean, I feed off their energy. I mean, I love working with young people because like they're so enthusiastic and so much full of energy and hope and optimism. And not that I'm not, but the older you get, it's harder to find that optimism. The world can sometimes get you down, and things can get you down. It's hard to keep things in perspective. Whereas, like for me, working with young people, there's so much built-in hope and optimism they have. I feed off that, and it makes my life better. And not that things would change in my life, but maybe I look at things differently. That I can bring a freshness and an energy that I didn't necessarily have. I honestly, I'm such a fan of these kids as far as like their songwriting, and that just they're nice kids. Like I'll miss them, hanging out with them, seeing them, all the the funny things they do and say, and they're just great. They're a great group, and they obviously they're great songs that they write. It's just a really nice group. It's just like I said, it's hard to explain what it is, but it's just like the right time with the right people at the right moment. Just everything has come together,
Right.
and it's something pretty incredible, and you can feel it. There are times where it's like, that's a really good song, or wow, her voice, or his words, or that performance. Like this kid's amazing. And I don't say that as a derogatory, like this kid, like they can't be amazing. But, I think the thing is for a lot of adults, we don't give children an opportunity to share their voice, whether they're 14 or 15 or, 7, that we don't give them enough chance. We think, well, no, you have to be an adult before you have anything worthy to say.
Those I've talked to are tremendously grateful for what you've given them, what Megan's given them, and what Glenn's given them. So good on you for fostering this kind of project.
Happy to do
it.
it.
Works. Fingers crossed it happens again.
Yes.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Regular listeners of the podcast will recognize the name Glenn Suter, who was, I forget what episode we were on the Eco Museum a while back in the 70s, I think.
A dozen ago.
Yeah, a while ago. And now you join us with another hat on out here at this fabulous Songs for Nature initiative here at Last Mountain Lake. On the final day, how are you feeling?
A bit whimsical because I'm tired.
Yeah.
a bit wistful because it's been a lot of fun, and I don't like fun things to end.
Yeah.
And excited to see. I mean, we've got the big show in June, and that'll be a lot of. It'll be very rewarding to see it all come together. So excited for that.
Did it meet your expectations?
Oh yes. I mean, when I got into this, I really wanted to see how being creative helped with connecting to nature, and I knew to get at that question, we needed the science, we needed the research set up, and all that. And we needed a process, but we also need the people.
Yeah.
So, and you never know who's going to sign up to these things,
right?
And I mean, the young people that did sign up, and the team that came together to make it happen have just been spectacular. They've all bought into the idea.
Yeah.
And really nature and human interactions done the rest. So
right. Yeah. And that stuff you can't plan, right?
No.
You just keep your fingers crossed and hope that there's chemistry and
Right.
And it was a little tense to begin with, right? On that September when everybody got together for the first little bit.
None of us knew what was going to happen or each other very well.
Yeah.
And no, it's been really good.
Music, the great unifier.
You know what? I think there are two parts of it I know I could depend on. I could depend on this place. I know Last Mountain Lake pretty well because I've done research up here, songbird research. And I could also trust the music. I know Ryan and Megan as songwriters and friends. And I know how open they are, how honest, how deep they can go really quickly with their music. So, and Ryan is a teacher, so he would know how to, do the teacher thing,
right,
and put it together that way. So those are two things I knew I could depend on. The rest, like you say, is unknowable.
Right. Yeah. How have you been able to bring the participants into these surroundings so that it's not just all about the music, but how these surroundings influence the music? Have you been able to impart to them?
Right. I guess I've done a couple things in that front, in that I'm familiar with the bird life and some of the plant life, the native prairie.
Mm-hmm.
So I can point things out as we're on hikes or whatever, and act as a bit of a tourist guide.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe an interpreter would be a better
Right.
job there. And also tell stories, because it's not just that's a Sprague's pipit that we're hearing. But
That we just
I've
heard
studied
right
that
now?
bird. No, actually, they're not around here.
Oh,
But
I see. What are
that's
we
one-
hearing right now?
Oh, we've got swallows, tree swallows. We've got lots of grackles. We've got morning doves going off. I heard a brown thrasher this morning. Morning dove over there, that mournful.
Yeah. It's so peaceful. I love that.
But I think because I've done research, I've got stories about the research.
Right.
So I can tell them,
Right.
funny things about doing the research, or a little more about the natural history of the particular plants or animals we're looking at. So
Right.
I think that helps.
Is there one pivotal moment in this weekend that just sort of stands out?
Yes. I'm going to go right to the mini concert we did last night to give the kids a sense of what they're going to be in for the final show, because that's another one of those unknowns, and we had to push them a little bit because I think there was a lot of hesitation to get up and actually do a song or one of their songs, because singing on a mic is different. It's a different experience. But if they're going to do it in June and have fun there, they need to do it at least once here.
Yeah.
And what happened last night was amazing. The kids, I keep calling them kids. They're not kids, young people. They brought out new songs. The country song was so fun. And I think that just was birthed yesterday.
Yeah.
It just came into being.
Yeah.
So to see them really rocking it last night was so cool. And all from that to the more really reflective personal songs that they chose to share, and that's a big step for anyone. I know personally as a songwriter, I remember distinctly how scared I was to stand up and play my own songs. I played in cover bands all the time, and that's all fun. But when it's your heart on your sleeve,
right.
You're really exposed.
Ryan and I were talking a little bit about this, but even just from my observation, they're an interesting group. They're sort of on the fringe. They're quirky. They're interesting. They're introspective. They're odd. They're wonderful. They're just. And Ryan was saying they may not always those types of personalities may not always fit so clearly in a defined classroom situation. And do you think that maybe that because they are so similar that way that sort of helped bring them together?
I think you're right. Yes. It's like getting dressed in rider gear for a rider game. If you're the only one doing it, you're going to feel really conspicuous. But in that crowd, you fit right in.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot to that. This was a process that was really where the participants self-identified, right? I think Ryan may have talked to a few directly, but the ad goes out, people gravitate to it. So I think you're going to get people who are have some natural interests in common.
Yeah.
Both, probably the songwriting, and then the nature piece is, oh, wow, we're camping? That's a bit different.
Yeah.
But
let's face it, it's the arts. We're all a bunch of oddballs.
That's true. And since it's a similar kind of niche for people to operate in, they can stretch their comfort zones a bit.
Yeah.
That's what I think has happened.
Yeah.
Everyone's here for the same kind of reasons, so they're willing to open up and give a little bit.
What's it given you personally on a musical level?
I wrote a song yesterday. Just poured it out. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's a cool one.
How'd that come about?
Oh, I walked out to the kiosk out there, which is amazing, sort of natural reverb, and just had the guitar, and I don't know exactly. 2 minutes later, I had something in my head, and so I took out my phone and turned on GarageBand, and there you go.
Right.
So I've got a version to work on now.
Was it birthed out of this experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's all about wanting to know. And I think that drives me as a researcher, as a father, as a citizen, wanting to understand things at some kind of level. And when you're surrounded by nature, she's amazing, right? She has so much to show and offer us. we're completely dependent on her.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege to be able to ask questions and interact with her in that way, like just from a place of wanting to know. And I mean, we've talked before. My focus is really the human global experiment is kind of in trouble.
Yeah.
And there's lots of evidence that neoliberal thinking and globalized capitalism is kind of causing some problems.
What are you going to, apart from the obvious that you don't get to wake up with this every morning, what are you going to miss about the experience outside of these immediate surroundings?
What am I going to miss about the experience? Wow.
Like, what are you going to be melancholy and thinking, about this time tomorrow night?
I think the trajectory. I mean, that's a funny answer, I guess, but
No.
For the last year and a bit, knowing it was coming, I was on that path and I knew that something like this was going to happen. But now it's completely a fog going ahead. Yeah. I mean, I think it's got some legs. Maybe we can keep it going.
Yeah.
We haven't decided at this point. But it's that certainty that I've really enjoyed. Knowing Ryan and Megan and Trish are on board and Carrie's so wonderful here. I mean, even knowing you were going to come out and do this is just part of that's cool. We know that stuff, and it's all going to be part of it's going to add to it. But I'm going to miss that kind of comfort.
Right. You hope that it could continue.
Yes.
In a perfect world.
Yes.
If it doesn't, then there's been a rare opportunity for a small group of population planet Earth that got to experience something that can never quite be replicated.
Well, that's true. I do personally hope it continues.
Yeah.
Small digression here. There's more research to be done on this. And I think it's something to keep alive. But that aside, just the larger process is kind of interesting, and I've enjoyed it so much.
But you're doing research on how this is, how the participants are affected more than just on a musical level, right? I mean, Trish's work is a whole other layer.
Yes, that's right.
And how did that kind of come into this process?
I think two reasons there too. One, I'm a researcher, so this is part of my research program at the museum. So there's that, and also personally as a songwriter, I have found songwriting to be, I don't want to use the word therapeutic, opening, enriching, like a real source of personal growth. So if I hold that up against, the world's in trouble and we need to reconnect to nature because we depend on it, doesn't that involve a bit of growth?
Right.
And maybe music is a way for more than me to experience that. That's part of what's driving my interests.
Right.
And that's why I hope it keeps going so I can stay involved in it. That'd be cool. And I hope, frankly, that other people hear it and go, well, we could do that.
Yeah.
I mean, why not have it planted down as seeds all over the place?
It doesn't always. Could you replicate this somewhere else? Could you go up to the boreal forest and you'd still?
Yes. And frankly, the budget is reasonable, but it's not an expensive proposition. So,
and Mother Nature is very generous that way.
Absolutely. And I know, there are park programs that are not comparable, but they're available, so they could be tweaked a bit, and there's ways it could spread.
What happened yesterday? There were some when I first pulled up. There were some visitors here that got a little bit of a surprise.
They did. Yeah. This is a popular national wildlife area, so it sees a lot of that kind of walk-in traffic. And I think it was a surprise to them that there were a dozen songwriters here. And then one of the fellows was fairly outgoing and asked if those of us sitting on the front porch wanted to sing a song, and we kind of. I made some stupid comment, but they went and talked to the students, and they jumped on it.
Right.
So started playing for them, and I think that was awesome.
Right.
It became another opportunity for them to feel what it's like to, because music's about communicating and expressing, and if you're not doing that with a partner, an audience.
Yeah.
It's kind of one-sided.
You get up at 4:30 in the morning the other morning.
I did. Yeah.
What was that? What was that like at that hour of the morning here?
It's beautiful that time of day. 'Cause it's,
What'd you see?
well, first I kicked up a deer that was bedded down right by the house here.
Oh,
So,
yeah? Oh.
that was fun right off the top.
Huh.
Lots of birds and beautiful sunrise. What else? I just took it all in.
It would be interesting. Not going to include this, but it would just me thinking out loud. It would be very interesting to repeat this kind of thing and mix the genres. And this is sort of not an original idea because it's something that I got to experience when I went to Banff back in the golden years when Banff had money.
Right.
And before everybody started their 9-month program, they got all of the disciplines together. There were like 300 people, and from musicians to writers, and everybody got split up, and they went on 3 mountain discovery trips for the weekend.
Yeah,
and you were tenting with visual artists and instrumentalists.
That would be very nice. Yeah,
it's very, very cool to find out that everybody has the same language. It's just that the medium is different that they use.
Very well put.
Yeah,
and so you're looking for a connection.
Yeah,
and different ways of making.
Yeah, that might be another way to put a spin on this moving forward. That breathes, the same but new life into the idea.
Right.
To take it to the next level.
I mean, my early experience in songwriting was at Emma Lake, so that's a natural mix,
of course, right.
Visual arts there.
Right.
It's amazing.
I mean, that you would have a painter painting something here that would inspire a musician to write something around that painting.
Oh, they did that specifically. They had musicians sort of taking inspiration and then playing their songs as the painter was working. So it was a real back and forth. And there were scientists there. So you've even got the other side of your brain people who are really cool and very interested. So,
well, there's the pitch for round 2 of this. And let's face it, you can never replicate this twice the same way, right? I mean, you could have 12. Is 12 participants? How many are there?
I think we came down to 12.
Right. So, but if it had been 12 other people, it would have been a completely different experience. Not better or worse, just completely different, right?
No, I've wondered too about adults in this setting with this focus. That'd be another.
Got to do it.
Yeah.
Got to do it. Well, bravo to you. I know this has been a long time coming, 3 years in the planning.
Yes, it has.
To sort of make this happen. It's somehow obviously meant to be because it's come together with some amazing people making it happen.
And it's so nice to have a record of it, thanks to you and all the recording that's been happening out here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me come along for the ride.
No worries.
I would not have known this place exists. This is not the kind of place like you have to purposely be coming here.
That's right, you do. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not, you zoom by it on the highway, right? You see the signs, whatever that is, zoom by, right? But once you know it, then it's a bit more of a draw.
But worth it.
I think so.
Worth it. Thanks, Glenn.
You bet.
Hey, thanks for listening. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. SaskScapes can be downloaded from iTunes, Google Play, the SaskScapes app for Android devices, and all of the other major podcasting apps. Stop by and say hi to us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter @SaskScapes. I'd really appreciate it if you stop by iTunes and give us a review or star rating. That boosts the podcast series in the rankings and more people get to hear your stories. Now, if you know an individual, a group, a town that has a story to tell, I'd love to hear from you. Contact me and I'll let you know what's involved in sponsoring your own episode of SaskScapes. There's no shortage of stories to be told here under the land of the living skies. So until next time...